uninformed, illogical, uneducated, and trite. He had requested $25,000 from Monsanto. Hey guys, today I'm diving into a topic which concerns us all, our food. I've talked about many things in the past. If you've seen my channel, if you've seen my Instagram, you know I'm a bit of a generalist sometimes when it comes to modernity and the things that affect us. And even though all those topics, immigration, surrogacy, the manosphere, are relevant to us, there's something I know that affects us every single day, which is what we eat. Where I live now, I see morbidly obese people everywhere I go. It's insane how broken the system is and how many people are super morally bankrupt, which allow this to go on. I'm currently at a very healthy weight, I think. I'm happy about it. I feel great in my outfits, but that was not always the case. I spent most of my 20s around 15 to 20 pounds more than now, and with acne. I tried many different diets and I had to learn a lot about food. Lately, my interest, however, has been around the corruption of the food industry. I have known for a long time that most food that you buy at the supermarket that comes in a plastic bag, it's probably not good for you. But I didn't realize the extent of the corruption behind it. Okay, so a little side note, relevant though. Not long ago, I found this account on Instagram called Food Science Babe. Not Food Babe, Food Science Babe. One of my followers sent me her Instagram. I forget for what reasons. And I explored her page with a deep curiosity. Okay. She was saying things which go against everything I believed about food. She was taking the everything in moderation approach almost to the extreme. At first, quite honestly, she almost had me fooled. But the more I saw her posts, the more my body recoiled to what she was saying. I was skeptical, to say the least. The trans flag on her profile, the she/her pronouns, and her promotion of obese women podcasts didn't help her credibility, at least in my eyes. To be honest, if you deny reality on one front, who's to say that you're not lying to yourself in other ways? This woman claimed to be a food scientist. That might as well be true, but let's remember that food scientists are hired by companies to put food in a lab and use chemicals to make that food addictive and highly palatable to the point that they are able to override our natural hunger cues and signals of satiation. So yes, she probably was one of those. She was claiming things like drinking Coca-Cola was fine, it didn't have any adverse reactions to health, eating diet foods is not unhealthy, eating a McDonald's burger that never expires is totally fine. Color me skeptical. She says she's a food scientist that has worked in the industry for 14 plus years. So let's explore that. Let's explore that industry that in her view gives her credibility and in mine takes it away. So recently I read this article about experts and how trusting them is not always the right move. And I'm going to read you an excerpt of the article. Sometimes the experts have an agenda. Imagine you are President of the United States. One day, the Major General of the Army and the CEO of the nation's biggest oil company comes into your office and tell you that Iraq has weapons of mass destruction. And unless we go to war and stop them, they're gonna nuke New York. What are you gonna do? Ignore them? You can't do that. After all, these are the experts. The problem is that both of these people have an agenda. The army wants war so they can inflate their budget. The oil company wants war so they can jack up the price of gas. Neither of these people are trustworthy, even though they're experts. Of course, maybe they're right. You can't know for sure if you just take what they say at face value. You have to dig into what they say for yourself. Otherwise, you could end up with a horrible war on your hands, and your approval rating could go down the tubes. And isn't that the truth? Around big food, the food industry, there are all these groups that often pretend to have no association with the food industry. They sound grassroots, they sound like NGOs, but the big food industry has ways to funnel money into them by intermediate charities. I might explore that topic a little further in another video, but I wanted to give you an idea. I wanted to give you context The money the food industry has for marketing and PR is mostly not to direct marketing like commercials. And sometimes that money goes to the people we're supposed to trust, the experts. The experts who most of the time claim to be independent. So, with that said, let's talk about an example. Let's talk about Professor Kevin Folta. Mr. Folta is a professor of the Horticultural Scientists Department at the University of Florida. Horticultural?
Horticultural.
How do you say that?
Horticultural.
He calls himself a full-time research scientist, and that his fields of expertise include molecular biology and agricultural science. Now, here's the thing. I have nowhere near his curriculum. I cannot debunk his claims necessarily. I have a degree in international affairs, minors in political science and communications. I am currently very slowly, making my way through Spanish law school, and I'm getting a certificate in integrative nutrition and health coaching. More on that later. More on that later if you're interested. So I don't know anything about molecular biology, but what I can point out to is how this man is untrustworthy. So let's focus on that. A few years ago, the professor went to some lectures by the food activist, Vani Hari, the food babe. You know, the food science babe essentially is a spin-off from her, a spin-off that preaches opposite of the food babe. So I'm actually reading her book at the moment, and she mentions this incident. I recommend the book. I will leave the link in the description. Anyway, this professor, after listening to Miss Harry, went on to write a post about her as an uninformed, illogical, uneducated, and trite. Harsh words, Mr. Folta, harsh words. After he wrote his post, he received emails from people associated with the food industry, including one from a Monsanto executive saying, quote, "Just saw this post, you rock, glad you were able to stop by, but a sacrifice for sure, Lisa," unquote. This professor, who is teaching students about food, metabolism, and horticulture, seems to be independent. I mean, that's what he says. Now, these emails don't necessarily prove that he's not independent, but then a bombshell. A New York Times article comes out. Food industry enlisted academics in GMO lobbying war, emails show. And what did we discover? The article went into how the chemical and food industries work with public scientists to advance their plans and keep consumers. And guess what? Mr. Folta was implicated in this as well. Shock. Oh my God, imagine my shock. They published hundreds of private emails between Dr. Folta, Monsanto, front groups, and Ketchum, a PR firm. The emails came to light after the Freedom of Information Act requests were made by a group called US Right to Know. So, this independent professor, Mr. Folta, who said he had no connections to these companies, had been exposed. He had requested $25,000 from Monsanto to further his biotech communication efforts, and he promised the Monsanto executives a, quote, solid return on the investments, unquote. I don't know about you guys, but that seems like a clear conflict of interest, and I'm only very early on my law career. What ended up happening, long story short, after this article came out, he tried to give the money back. Monsanto didn't accept it because they said that doing that looked like an admission of guilt. And so the university ended up reallocating the funds. He's still a professor there, by the way. Now, this is only an example that got exposed, but everyone involved got away with a slap on the wrist. Then we have the dietitians. I'm not sure what's worse, honestly, but so let's talk about this. Coca-Cola has in the past bragged about the fact that hundreds of thousands of registered nurses, registered dietitians, pharmacists, and health physicians have taken their continuing education courses. And for a little context, let's be clear, there have been reports to show that research that has been sponsored by the food and beverage industry is 4 to 8 times more likely than independent research to favor the sponsor. So, It seems in some ways that the research is more for PR than real study. I would not be surprised, in fact I could bet, that that's what the Coca-Cola continuing courses are teaching the dietitians, which comes directly from their funded research. And last year, the Washington Post came out with an article, "The Food Industry Pays Influencer Dietitians to Shape Your Eating Habits." Now, I won't get too deep into this, but it was exposed that hundreds, if not thousands, of dietitians had been paid to promote products from the food industry, and they were not disclosing their connections to the food industry. In the article, some dietitians/influencers were called out by name, and I went to check the pages of these people. Some of them never addressed the issue, never addressed the article, and clearly deleted comments that were pointing this out. Other ones did address it and said yes, they are in fact partnered with some agencies connected to the food and beverage industry. Here's why that's not a problem. Some seem not to be bothered. My conclusion? Some of these experts are just as brainwashed, if not more so, than the public. So some might actually think that drinking Coca-Cola is totally healthy. And are we surprised? They went through hundreds of hours of education teaching them this. And I don't mean to say that all education is false or bad, but I think we need to be quite careful when there are such powerful interests involved. Cheers. See you next time.